Catherine's voice cut the music dead.
Who let this black dog into my son's wedding?
Booker didn't flinch. The word landed soft, familiar.
Ma'am, I'm here for my daughter.
Your daughter? Daughter! You smell disgusting.
Get out! Trash doesn't belong here. Drag him out of here. Wait. I'm the bride's father. I came for Imani.
Hands seized Booker's arms before he finished the name. They dragged him across the cold marble floor, shoes squealing, guests parting like he was contagious. Catherine's lip curled.
Her father wiped down every chair he touched.
Booker glanced at his own hands. Clean, steady. They had no idea. This filth they spat on could save the groom's dying company. 6 hours earlier, the sun was just coming up over the coast. Booker Owens stepped off a red-eye with one carry-on and a garment bag slung over his shoulder. No driver, no entourage. He waved off the black car waiting with his name on a sign and walked to the taxi line instead. He liked watching the world wake up, always had. At a gas station off the highway, he bought a large black coffee and a pack of gum. The cashier looked tired. Booker read her name tag. Long shift, Denise? She blinked, surprised he'd asked. Double, actually. He left a tip that made her look up twice. Then he was gone, coffee steaming in his hand, the morning thin and gold around him. You'd never guess what this man was worth. That was the point. For 30 years, Booker had built something quiet and enormous. He invested through a firm called Cardinal Ridge Capital. No press, no face on magazine covers. Money moved, companies lived or died, and almost nobody knew the man behind it. He liked it that way. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. A text from his daughter. "Dad, you here yet? I'm freaking out." He smiled and called her. Imani picked up on half a ring. In the background, he could hear hairspray, heels on hardwood, somebody asking about flowers. "Breathe, baby," he said. "It's your wedding, not a deposition." "Easy for you to say," she laughed, then went quiet. "Dad, just be yourself today, okay? The Davises are a lot." "A lot how?" A pause. "They're old money, very particular about appearances." Booker watched the coastline blur past the window. "I've handled particular before." "I know, She stopped. "I want today to be perfect. For us." "It will be," he said. "I'm proud of you. You know that?" He heard her smile through the phone. "I know, Dad." What neither of them said out loud. The Davises had never met him. The engagement had been fast, and Booker had spent most of it overseas, closing deals on 3 continents. Today, the two families would meet for the very first time. Booker had decided to come simple. Plain suit, no flash. He wanted to see who these people really were, how they treated a man they assumed had nothing. He'd find out faster than he expected. Across town, the Hartwell Bay Club gleamed white against the water. Crystal, imported orchids, a string quartet tuning under a tent that cost more than most cars. And on the stone veranda, Catherine Davis was already holding court. "You should have seen the girl's file," she murmured to a cluster of guests, swirling her champagne. "No pedigree, no name. And the father," she gave a delicate shudder. "Some broke retiree, I'm told. A laborer." A woman beside her tutted. "At a wedding like this?" "My thoughts exactly," Catherine sipped. "Let's just pray he has the sense to dress for it. And to keep his distance." Laughter rippled through the little circle, soft and poisonous. Nearby, her son Preston adjusted his cufflinks in a mirror, jaw tight. He looked like a man wearing a smile 2 sizes too small. Because the Davises had a secret of their own. Down by the docks, out of earshot, his father Gerald paced with a phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low and frantic. "No, listen to me. The board meets Monday. If Cardinal Ridge doesn't sign that term sheet, we're done. Finished. Do you understand what that means?" He didn't notice the gulls. He didn't notice the view. Davis Marine Holdings, the family company, 4 generations of name and pride, was weeks from collapse. One investor stood between them and the end, a faceless firm called Cardinal Ridge. Gerald hung up, wiped his forehead, and forced a smile back onto his face. The guests sipped, the quartet played, the orchids glowed, and somewhere on the highway, a man with a gas station coffee and a worn paperback was getting closer. None of them knew the name on that term sheet. None of them knew it was already on its way. The taxi pulled up to the Hartwell Bay Club a little after 4. Booker was late. His flight had circled for an hour, and he'd changed in the back seat. Plain gray suit, no tie, the jacket a touch wrinkled from the bag. He smoothed it once, picked up his coffee, and stepped out into the salt air. The club took his breath for a second. White stone, glass railings, the ocean flashing silver behind a row of imported palms. Music drifted from a tent, soft and expensive. He smiled. His little girl was getting married here. Then he started up the steps, and the smiling stopped. A young man in a headset stepped into his path. He looked Booker up and down, the wrinkled jacket, the paper cup, and his face did a small, ugly thing. "Deliveries are around back," the man said. "I'm a guest," Booker answered. "Sure you are." The man didn't move. "Vendor entrance. Around the side, past the dumpsters." Booker kept his voice even. "My name's on the list, Owens." The man didn't even check. He just smirked, like the name was a punchline. "Right. Around back, pal." A second staffer drifted over, sizing Booker up the same way. "He with catering?" "Says he's a guest." A snort. "Says his name's on the list." They laughed. Not loud, just enough. Booker felt the old, familiar weight settle on his shoulders. He'd carried it his whole life. The look that said, "You don't belong here," before he'd spoken a single word. He breathed through it. "Could you check the list?" OWENS. The headset man sighed like Booker was wasting his afternoon. He flipped a page on his clipboard, ran a bored finger down it, and paused. Something was there. Booker watched the flicker of doubt cross his face. Then the man shrugged it off. "Must be a mistake. We get crashers." Crashers. At his own daughter's wedding. Booker said nothing. He stepped around the man and walked toward the veranda, calm as still water. Behind him, the headset crackled, a low voice muttering, "Keep eyes on him, the older one." Yeah. So now he had a shadow. Inside the garden, the world was champagne and silk. Women in pale dresses turned to look at him. Conversations dipped, then resumed in lower tones. A man in a blue blazer actually stepped back, pulling his date with him, as if Booker might brush against them. A waiter passed with a tray. Booker reached for a water, and an older woman in pearls clucked her tongue. "They really will let anyone serve these days," she said, to him, assuming the tray was his to carry. She set her empty glass on his palm and walked away. Booker stood there, a dirty glass in his hand, and let out a slow breath. He looked down at the lipstick smudge on the rim. Then he set the glass gently on a table and wiped his hand on a napkin. His coffee had gone cold. He didn't drink it anyway. Near the gift table, a thin man in a bow tie was watching him hard. Booker drifted past, just looking for his daughter, and the man stepped sideways to block the table with his body. "Can I help you find the exit?" the man said. "I'm fine, thank you." "Those envelopes are counted," the man added, low. "Just so you know." Booker stopped. Let the insult sit in the air a moment. Then he simply nodded and moved on. He'd learned long ago that arguing only fed them. But his pulse had climbed. He could feel it now, a slow drum under the calm. He was scanning the crowd for Imani when a sharp voice cut toward him. Excuse me, you!" A young man strode across the lawn. Tall, blond, jaw clenched, a glass of bourbon sweating in his hand. The groom. Booker knew his face from a photo on Imani's phone. This was Preston, his daughter's almost husband, a man he was about to meet for the very first time. Preston stopped a few feet away, like closing the gap might cost him something. "You're the one the staff flagged," Preston said. "Wandering around, touching things." "I'm Imani's father," Booker said. He put out his hand. "Booker Owens. It's good to finally—" Preston looked at the hand like it was something pulled from a drain. He didn't take it. The seconds stretched. Booker let his hand fall, slow, no drama. But something in his chest went quiet and cold. "Imani's father," Preston repeated, tasting the words with contempt. "Right. Mother said you'd show. Said you were some broke old timer." He looked Booker over again. "Didn't say you'd come dressed like the help." "It was a long flight," Booker said simply. "I'm sure." Preston's mouth twisted. "Let me guess. Here for the open bar? The gift table? Figured you'd grab a free plate and a few envelopes while nobody's looking." A few guests had drifted closer, sensing blood. Phones came out, low and casual, held at hip height. "I'm here for my daughter," Booker said. "Nothing else." "Sure." Preston took a slow sip of bourbon. "Here's how today goes. You stand over there," he pointed to a far corner by the service tent, "and you don't touch anything, talk to anyone, or end up in a single photo. This is a respectable family. Try not to embarrass her more than you already have." Booker's jaw tightened, just barely. Most people would have missed it. "She's my daughter," he said, very quietly. "I'll embarrass no one." "You're embarrassing me right now," Preston snapped. That's when Catherine arrived. She swept across the lawn in cream silk, drawn by the gathering crowd like a shark to a ripple. Her eyes landed on Booker and narrowed, a smile freezing on her face. "Preston, darling, what is this?" "The bride's father," Preston said, not hiding his disgust. "Apparently." Catherine's gaze traveled down Booker's body and back up. The coffee cup, the wrinkled jacket, the dark skin. He watched a verdict form behind her eyes before he'd said a word. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, so it's true." She didn't offer her hand. She lifted a napkin to her own nose. "You'll forgive me," she said, voice cool. "You smell of travel and something else." A small laugh from the crowd. Quick, cruel. Booker had sat in boardrooms with men who could end careers with a phone call. He'd faced hostile takeovers without blinking. None of it touched him the way that little laugh did. He kept his face calm. The calm cost him everything. "Ma'am," he said, "I just want to see my daughter married, that's all." Catherine's smile sharpened. "Your daughter is marrying up, into a real family. The least you could do is not remind everyone what she's crawling out of." She turned to a passing server. "You, fresh chair for the back row, and wipe down anything this man has touched. I won't have it spreading." The server hesitated. He was young, maybe 20, and his eyes flicked to Booker with something like apology. For a moment it looked like he might refuse. "Now," Catherine said. The boy's shoulders dropped. Ashamed, he reached for a cloth and began wiping the chair Booker had stood beside, rubbing slow, not meeting anyone's eyes. A few guests watched. Most just smiled into their drinks. One woman lifted her phone a little higher, filming openly now, grinning like this was the entertainment. Booker noticed all of it. The boy's shame, the grinning woman, the way the crowd leaned in, hungry. He filed each face away, quiet and exact, the way he'd once memorized balance sheets. Booker looked down at his own open hands, clean, steady. He turned them over slowly, as if checking for the dirt they all seemed to see. There was none. There never had been. He looked up and met Catherine's eyes. "You don't know me yet," he said. Soft, almost kind. Catherine blinked, thrown half a second by the steadiness in his voice. Then she recovered, lip curling. "And I don't intend to," she said. A hush had spread across that corner of the garden. Guests pretended to sip and chat, but every ear had turned. Every phone was angled. The quartet played on, sweet and oblivious, while a man stood quietly at the center of a ring of disgust. Booker glanced past them all, searching one more time for the only face he'd flown across the country to see. He couldn't find her yet. But Imani was coming. and the people sneering at her father had no idea what they'd just set in motion. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Preston decided the moment wasn't humiliating enough. "You know what?" he said, setting his bourbon on a passing tray. "Let's be sure. People like you don't wander into a place like this for nothing." He nodded at the two guards, hovering at the edge of the circle. "Check him." Booker went still. "Check me for what?" "For whatever you came to take." Preston smiled, thin and cold. "Empty your pockets." The garden seemed to hold its breath. A gull cried somewhere over the water. The quartet finally stumbled to a stop, bows lowering, the musicians staring like everyone else. "I'm not emptying anything," Booker said quietly. "I'm a guest. I'm her father." "Then you've got nothing to hide." Catherine's voice was honey over ice. "Cooperate and you can crawl back to wherever you came from that much sooner." A guard stepped in close. He was big, bored, used to doing what rich people told him. He reached for Booker's jacket. Booker caught his wrist, gently but firm. "Don't." The guard froze. For 1 second, the older man's grip told him something his eyes had missed. This wasn't a man who scared. "He grabbed me," the guard announced, too loud, playing to the crowd. "You all saw it. He put hands on me." "He's aggressive," Preston said instantly. "Of course he is. Search the bag, too." Booker's garment bag hung over a chair where he'd set it down. Before he could speak, the second guard unzipped it and turned it upside down. A folded shirt fell out, a toiletry kit, a worn paperback, its spine cracked from 100 flights, and a small velvet box. The box hit the grass and popped open. Inside sat a pair of pearl earrings, old, simple, beautiful. The kind a man saves for one perfect day. "Well, well," Preston said, bending to scoop them up. "And where exactly did you steal these?" Something flickered across Booker's face. Not anger, hurt. "Those were my wife's," he said. The words came out rough. "Imani's mother. I brought them for my daughter. To wear today." He reached out. "Please, give them back." Preston held the box just out of reach, turning it in the light, enjoying it. "Convenient story. They're hers," Booker said again. And for the first time his voice cracked at the edges. "Please. Pearls like these don't belong to men like you." Catherine plucked the box from her son's fingers and snapped it shut. "We'll hold on to these, for safekeeping." The cruelty of it landed harder than any shove. They weren't just insulting him now. They were taking the last thing he had of the woman he'd buried. Booker's hands curled slowly at his sides. He breathed in, breathed out, made himself open them again. He would not give these people a reason. Not today, not at his daughter's wedding. "You can search me all you want," he said, low and even. "You can take what you like. I've been treated worse by better people than you." That landed. Catherine's smile twitched. "Did you hear that?" Preston barked a laugh, covering it. "He's threatening us. At my own wedding." "I'm not threatening anyone," Booker said. But the crowd was murmuring now, and the murmur was turning. More phones rose. A man near the back muttered, "This is too much," and his wife shushed him. Then Preston stepped in close, lowering his voice so only Booker and the nearest cameras could hear. "Let me tell you something," he said. "I don't care whose father you are. You see all this?" He swept a hand at the white tents, the orchids, the ocean. "This is what real families look like. Clean, successful. And then there's you, showing up looking like that, smelling like that." His lip curled. "You're a stain. And I don't let stains stand near my bride." "That bride," Booker said softly, "is my whole world." "Then you should have stayed away from her," Preston hissed. "You're the most embarrassing thing that's happened to her, and she knows it." And that was the line that finally moved something in Booker's eyes. Not rage, worse, a deep, settling cold. "Say that again," he said. Preston blinked. For just a heartbeat, the steadiness in the old man's voice rattled him. Then his pride took over. "Security, I want him gone. Now, Drag him out if you have to." "Preston, wait," came a voice, but it was too late. The guards moved. One seized Booker's left arm, the other his right. They wrenched him around, and his shoulder twisted hard, the box of pearls still clutched in Catherine's hand. "That's my daughter's," Booker started. They hauled him backward. His shoes scraped across the stone. A table caught his hip, and a tray of glasses crashed down, shattering, champagne foaming across the marble. Gasps rippled out. Some guests stepped back. Others lifted their phones higher, drinking it in. "Keep moving," Preston ordered, walking alongside like a man supervising the trash. "Off the property, all the way off." "You're hurting him," someone called. "He'll live," Preston said. Booker didn't fight. That was the thing that haunted the people who watched it later. He could have. There was a strength in him, coiled and obvious, that none of them understood. But he chose stillness. He let them drag him, his head high, his eyes fixed forward, as if he were walking himself out and they were just along for the ride. The salt wind whipped across the veranda. Somewhere a child started crying. The shattered glass crunched under the guard's boots. And then, cutting through all of it, "Dad?" The whole garden turned. She stood frozen at the top of the steps, in a white gown, veil half pinned, a bouquet hanging forgotten from one hand. Imani, the bride. Her eyes went from the guards, to the spilled glass, to the man they were dragging, her father. "What are you doing?" Her voice broke. "Let him go. That's my father. Let him go right now." She ran down the steps, gown gathered in her fists, and shoved between the guards and Booker. "Get your hands off him!" For a second, the guards hesitated, glancing at Preston. Imani turned on her groom, chest heaving, tears already cutting down her face. "Preston, what did you do?" Preston's jaw worked. "Imani, calm down." He showed up looking like a vagrant, harassing the guests. "He's my father!" "And frankly," Catherine cut in, stepping forward with the velvet box still in her fist, "now we see exactly where you came from, dear. The apple, the tree." She gave a cold little smile. "Perhaps this is for the best, before any more of this married into our name." The words hit Imani like a slap. She stared at the woman about to become her mother-in-law, then at the man she was about to marry, who said nothing, who would not even meet her eyes. She'd spent months making excuses for them, telling herself they'd warm up, telling herself the cold remarks were just nerves, just old money stiffness, just adjustment. Now she watched her father's jacket hang torn at the shoulder, watched the pearls disappear into Catherine's fist, and every excuse she'd built collapsed at once. And in her father's hands, empty now, scraped raw from the stone, she saw everything she needed to see. Booker straightened slowly. He looked at his daughter, at the heartbreak on her face, the gown she'd dreamed about, the family that had just shown her exactly who they were. He was done being quiet. "Give my daughter her mother's earrings," he said. His voice had changed. It wasn't loud. It was something else. Something that made the nearest guests go silent on instinct, the way a room goes still before a storm finally breaks. Catherine laughed, but it came out thin. Or what? Booker reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, and the guards flinched. But he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a phone. He pressed one button, lifted it to his ear, and held Preston's gaze the entire time. "It's me," he said into the phone. "Yes, I'm at the Hartwell Bay Club." A pause. "Bring the documents, all of them, and bring the car." He lowered the phone. "You wanted to know who I am," he said. "You're about to find out." And far across the lawn, near the docks, Gerald Davis, the groom's father, had finally heard the commotion. He came hurrying up the path, red-faced, ready to smooth over whatever embarrassing scene the help had caused. He pushed through the crowd, opened his mouth to bark an order, and saw the man standing at the center of it all. Gerald stopped dead. The color drained from his face, because he knew that face. He'd seen it once, years ago, in a single private photograph his desperate lawyers had managed to dig up. The face of the one investor who could save everything. "Oh my God," Gerald whispered. "Oh my God. That's—" He couldn't finish. His knees nearly buckled. The man his son had just dragged across the floor like garbage was the only person on Earth who could stop their entire world from collapsing. For a moment, Gerald just stood there, swaying. "Dad?" Preston frowned. "What's wrong with you? Help me get rid of this—" "Shut up!" Gerald's voice came out strangled. "Shut your mouth right now." Preston blinked. He'd never heard his father speak to him that way. Then a black car rolled up the drive, smooth and silent, and a woman in a sharp navy suit stepped out. She carried a leather folder under one arm and crossed the lawn like she owned every blade of grass on it. "Mr. Owens," she called, warm and clear. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic off the highway." Heads turned. The guards loosened their grip without quite knowing why. The woman stopped beside Booker, took in his torn jacket, the spilled glass, the guard's hand still on him. Her eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Is there a problem here?" she asked the crowd, pleasantly. "And you are?" Catherine snapped. "Vivian Carter, Chief Operating Officer, Cardinal Ridge Capital." She let the name sit. "I handle Mr. Owens' acquisitions." The word Cardinal hit Gerald like a punch. He made a small, broken sound. "Cardinal Ridge," Catherine repeated, still not understanding. "So he works for you. A driver or—" "No," Vivian almost smiled. "He owns us. Mr. Owens founded Cardinal Ridge 30 years ago. He's the principal. The signature on every deal we make is his." Silence dropped over the garden like a curtain. "That's not—" Preston started. "That's a lie. Look at him." "Preston," Gerald's voice shook. "Preston, do you have any idea what Cardinal Ridge is?" His son stared at him blankly. "It's the firm." Gerald could barely get the words out. "The investor, the one I've been on the phone with for 6 months, the one signing the rescue, the $1,500 million rescue. The only reason this company, this family, isn't already bankrupt." The blood drained from Preston's face. Vivian opened the leather folder, calm as a Sunday morning. Inside sat a thick term sheet, tabbed and ready, a small red flag where a signature belonged. "The board meets Monday," she said lightly. "We were prepared to wire the first tranche to Davis Marine Holdings at 9 a.m. Mr. Owens flew in personally, on his own time, to attend his daughter's wedding before signing." She glanced around at the wreckage of glasses and torn fabric. "He wanted to meet the family first." She looked at Booker. "I take it you've met them?" "I have," Booker said quietly. He turned, slow, and let his gaze travel across the mall. The guards who'd twisted his arms. The guests who'd filmed. Catherine, the velvet box still clutched in her fist. Preston, who'd called him a stain. The strangest thing was how nobody looked disgusted anymore. Now they looked terrified. "Mr. Owens," Catherine breathed, the napkin gone from her nose, her voice suddenly silk again. "Sir, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The light, the travel, we had no idea who you—" "That's the point," Booker said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The whole garden leaned in to catch every word. For 30 years he had walked into rooms exactly like this one, rooms that decided what he was before he opened his mouth. He'd learned to let it slide off, to keep his head down and his ledgers clean and his anger folded away somewhere deep. But this was his daughter's wedding, and they had made her cry. "You had no idea who I was. So you decided I was nothing. You looked at an old black man in a cheap suit, and you knew, didn't you? You knew exactly how little I was worth." He let the silence stretch. "And you were proud of it." Catherine's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You searched me like a criminal. You took my late wife's earrings out of my hands and called me a thief." His voice stayed level, and somehow that made it worse. "You did all of it in front of 300 people, in front of my little girl." "Give him the box, Mother," Gerald said, hoarse. Her fingers tightened around it on instinct. "Give it to him!" Gerald roared, and the whole garden flinched. Catherine crossed the grass on shaking legs, and held out the velvet box. Booker took it, opened it, checked the pearls were unharmed. Then he closed it softly and turned away from her like she wasn't there. He walked to his daughter. "These were your mother's," he said, his voice finally gentle. He pressed the box into Imani's hands. "She wanted you to wear them. Whatever you decide to do today, they're yours." Imani was crying openly now, mascara streaked, but her chin was high. Booker turned back to the crowd one last time. "You spent an hour deciding I didn't belong here," he said. "Let me save you some time." He looked at Preston. "By Monday morning, you'll understand exactly how much that decision cost you." Far at the edge of the garden, the young server who'd been forced to wipe the chair lowered his cloth and, very quietly, began to smile. The phones were still recording. Every single one. And not one person on that lawn was laughing anymore. Gerald moved first because Gerald had the most to lose. He pushed past his own son and stopped in front of Booker, hands half raised, like a man approaching a fire he'd lit himself. "Mr. Owens, please, I am begging you." His voice cracked. "Whatever my family did here today, that's on them, not the company. 400 people work for Davis Marine, 400 families. They had nothing to do with this." It was the first true thing anyone in that family had said all day. Booker studied him for a long moment. "You're right, they didn't." Hope flickered across Gerald's face. "Which is the only reason I'm going to think carefully," Booker went on, "before I decide what happens to them." He turned to Vivian. "Close the folder." She closed it. "Mr. Owens, wait," Gerald started. "Cardinal Ridge is withdrawing from the Davis Marine deal," Booker said, clear enough for every phone to catch. "Effective now. There will be no wire Monday morning. No signature." The words landed like a dropped anchor. Preston lunged forward. "You can't do that. We have an agreement. My father spent months. You can't just—" "I can." Booker didn't even look at him. "There's no signature on that term sheet. There never was. You assumed a man in a cheap suit couldn't take everything from you." He finally met Preston's eyes. "You assumed wrong." Catherine grabbed her son's arm. "Preston, stop talking, stop talking." But Preston was unraveling now, the color high in his cheeks. "This is insane. You're punishing the whole company over a misunderstanding at a party?" "A misunderstanding." Booker repeated it softly, like he was turning the word over. "You searched an old man for sport. You stole his dead wife's earrings. You called him filth and had him dragged across the floor in front of his daughter." He let it sit. "If that's a misunderstanding to you, son, then your company is exactly where it deserves to be." The crowd had gone dead quiet. Somewhere, the ocean kept rolling against the rocks, indifferent to all of it. Then a new voice spoke. Steady, clear. "Preston." Everyone turned. Imani had stopped crying. She stood straight in her white gown, the velvet box held tight in both hands, her mother's pearls catching the late light. "You didn't say one word," she said. "When they searched him, when they grabbed him, when your mother called him filth." Her voice didn't shake. "You stood there, and you let it happen." "Imani," Preston reached for her. "Baby, I didn't know who he—" "That's the whole problem." She stepped back from his hand. "You didn't know he was rich, so you thought it was fine. You thought it was fine, Preston." She pulled the engagement ring off her finger. The crowd inhaled as one. "I spent a year telling myself your family would learn to love me," she said. "Today they showed me the truth, and so did you." She set the ring in his open palm and closed his fingers around it. "The wedding's off." "Imani, please," Catherine started, switching to Honey. "Darling, let's all take a breath. Families fight. We can fix—" "Don't." Imani didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Don't darling me. You wiped down a chair because my father sat in it." She turned her back on them and walked to Booker. He opened his arm and she stepped under it, and for the first time since the gown went on, she let herself breathe. Near the service tent, the young server set down his cloth for good. He wasn't the only one. Two of the catering staff had stopped working entirely, watching with something like awe. One of them lifted a phone and kept it lifted. Booker looked at the wreckage of the wedding, the spilled champagne, the abandoned tables, the silent quartet, 300 guests who'd watched a man be humiliated and done nothing. Then he looked down at his daughter and spoke, quiet, just for her. "Come on, baby," he said. "Let's go home." They walked toward the black car together, unhurried, the crowd parting for them now for an entirely different reason. Behind them, Gerald Davis sank onto a wiped-down chair and put his head in his hands. His company had 4 days to live, and every second of its death was already online. The video hit the internet before Booker's car even reached the highway. Someone titled it, "Black Father Called Filth, Dragged from Daughter's Wedding." He was the billionaire about to save the groom's company. By midnight, it had 2 million views. By morning, 11. The worst part for the Davises was that the camera missed nothing. The handkerchief Catherine pressed to her nose, the chair being wiped while Booker stood beside it. Preston's voice, crisp and clear. "Drag this filth out before it stains something." There was no spin, no context, no "you weren't there." It was all there, every frame. The clip didn't read as a class mix-up. It read as exactly what it was. A wealthy white family deciding a black man was dirty and treating him like garbage for it, on the most expensive day of their lives. The comments came like a flood. Then the news vans came too. By Tuesday, 3 separate networks had run the footage. Anchors shook their heads. Panels debated. The phrase "wipe down the chair" became shorthand across the country for a particular kind of cruelty dressed up in pearls. Davis Marine Holdings died first. It happened fast, the way these things do once the money smells blood. With Cardinal Ridge gone, the company had no rescue and no time. The 2 backup lenders Gerald had been quietly courting both stopped returning his calls within hours of the video going viral. No bank wanted its logo anywhere near that wedding. On Wednesday, the board of Davis Marine held an emergency session. They didn't invite Gerald. By the time he found out, it was over. The board voted to remove him as chief executive, partly for the collapse, partly because his family's name was now radioactive. The man whose great-grandfather founded the company was walked out of his own building by security, the same way his son had walked Booker out of that garden. He felt every step of it. Thursday, the company filed for bankruptcy protection. 4 generations of the Davis name gone in 96 hours. But the law wasn't finished. A local prosecutor had watched the video like everyone else. Unlike everyone else, she had subpoena power. The forced search, the seized earrings, the 2 guards wrenching a man's arms while he said again and again that he was only there for his daughter. That wasn't just ugly, it was criminal. Preston was charged with battery and unlawful restraint. The 2 security guards were charged alongside him. The venue, the Hartwell Bay Club, was named in a civil suit for what its staff had allowed and encouraged on its grounds. Booker didn't have to lift a finger. 300 witnesses and a dozen camera angles did the work for him. His lawyers simply made sure none of it got quietly swept away, the way these things so often were for families like the Davises. In court, Preston's attorney tried the only card he had. A misunderstanding, a heated moment, a young man under stress on his wedding day. The prosecutor played the video. Then she played it again. This time she froze it on a single frame. Booker's hand, open and empty, turned over as he searched it for the dirt they all claimed to see. She let the courtroom sit with that image in silence for a long, long moment. This man, she told the jury, asked for one thing all day, to watch his daughter get married. They gave him this instead. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. Preston was convicted on both counts. He drew probation, a heavy fine, mandatory community service, and a sentence that, for a man like him, cut deepest of all. His name, permanently attached to that footage, in every search, forever. The guards lost their licenses. The Hartwell Bay Club settled the civil suit for a sum it refused to disclose and quietly changed its entire security policy. Imani sat in the front row for every day of the trial, her mother's pearls in her ears. She never once looked at Preston. She didn't need to. She had already said everything she needed to say on the lawn. Catherine was never charged with a crime. You can't arrest someone for a handkerchief and a sneer. But she didn't escape either. Her clubs let her memberships lapse. Her friends stopped answering. The woman who had built her whole life around appearances watched the only thing she truly valued, her standing, evaporate completely. She became a cautionary tale told at the very dinner parties she used to host. And then there were the 400. The workers at Davis Marine. The welders, the machinists, the schedulers, the people in the back office who'd never set foot at that wedding and had nothing to do with any of it. When the company collapsed, their jobs went with it, through no fault of their own. Booker knew that math from the moment Gerald begged him on the lawn. So he did something nobody expected. A month after the bankruptcy, a new buyer stepped in and purchased Davis Marine's shipyards out of liquidation. The buyer kept the facilities open, honored the pensions, and brought back every single worker who wanted their job. The deal was structured quietly through a holding company most people had never heard of. It was Cardinal Ridge. Booker had walked away from the Davises. He had not walked away from the people they would have dragged down with them. When a reporter asked him why, he gave a short answer that traveled almost as far as the original video. "I was never angry at the workers," he said. "I was angry at the people who thought some lives mattered less than others. Those are different things. You should never confuse them." He gave the new company a new name. He put a worker on its board, and he made sure the first thing posted in the break room was a simple policy, printed plain and framed on the wall. Everyone who walks through these doors is treated like they own the place. No exceptions. The young server from the wedding, the one who'd been forced to wipe the chair, the one who'd finally set his cloth down, saw the story online. On a whim, he wrote Booker a short message, just to say he was sorry he hadn't done more. 2 weeks later, he had a job offer and a scholarship attached to it. Because Booker remembered every face in that garden, the cruel ones, and the ones who'd been ashamed. 6 months later, the coast looked the same. The people on it had changed. On a quiet morning, far from any wedding venue, Booker Owens sat on a wooden porch with a gas station coffee cooling in his hand and a worn paperback open on his knee. The salt air drifted up from the water. Gulls wheeled in the early light. His daughter came out in sweatpants, hair tied back, no veil, no pearls, just herself. She set down 2 plates and stole his coffee, the way she had since she was 9. "You could buy the whole gas station, Dad," Imani said. "You still drink this stuff." "Tastes the same whether you've got $1 or $1 billion, he said. "That's why I like it." She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind he hadn't heard from her in over a year. Imani had started over. She'd opened a small design studio with the settlement she never asked for and never spent on herself. Her first hire was a young man who used to work catering at a club on the bay, the one who'd once been handed a cloth and told to wipe a chair. He ran her front office now. He greeted every visitor like they owned the place. Preston finished his community service quietly, in a town where everyone knew his face for one reason only. Gerald sold the last of the family homes and moved somewhere no one recognized the name. Catherine stopped appearing in photographs altogether. The appearances she'd spent a lifetime guarding had finally, completely, stopped mattering, because no one was looking anymore. And the shipyard kept running. 400 people still clocked in each morning, under a new name, past a framed sign by the door. Here's the thing worth sitting with. This story is fiction. Booker isn't real. The Hartwell Bay Club isn't real. The wedding never happened. But the look that decided a man was worthless before he spoke, that is real. The assumption that a plain suit and dark skin add up to less than, that is real. People live some version of that moment in grocery stores, lobbies, traffic stops, and yes, sometimes at weddings, every single day. Most of them are not secret billionaires. Most of them just go home carrying it. That is what makes the fantasy satisfying, and a little sad at the same time. We cheer when the truth flips the room. We love watching the cruelty come back around. But the comfortable lie inside the story is that the man had $1 billion to make them pay. The harder truth is this: he shouldn't have needed one. His dignity didn't begin the moment Vivian said his name. It was there in the taxi line. It was there when he tipped a tired cashier and learned her name. It was there in his clean, steady, open hands. The money only made the room finally see what was true the whole time. So the real question the story leaves behind isn't whether people like the Davises exist. They do. The question is what the rest of us do in that garden, when there's no billionaire reveal coming, when it's just an ordinary person being treated like they don't belong. Do we lift our phones and smile? Do we look into our drinks and say nothing? Or do we set down the cloth, like one young man finally did, and refuse? Because most people in that crowd weren't cruel. They were just quiet. And quiet, on the wrong day, looks an awful lot like agreement. Here's the invitation. Be the one who says something. Be the one who sets down the cloth. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever watched someone get judged for how they looked, and what did you do? Would you have spoken up in that garden? Or are you honest enough to admit you might have stayed quiet? Drop your answer below. We read them. Hit like if Booker's calm hit harder than any shouting could. Share this with one person who needs the reminder that you never really know who you're standing next to. And subscribe, because the next story flips a room even harder than this one did. Until then, treat the person in front of you like they own the place. No exceptions.